Jesus, and they would have the answer. So we just need you to test him so that we can get rid of him. And it'd be like, oh, okay, well that's different. Okay, so what are the consequences? We just said it, undermine authority. I think it's absolutely true that, when we think about this, to pause, we're in the middle of this cultural hurricane. It's not unlike what happened in the transition from the Middle Ages into modernity. People are going to feel lost for a long time. I often joke that when we get to heaven on the Jumbotron, which you may or may not know about the Jumbotron, but I went to seminary, so there's a Jumbotron. And on the Jumbotron, it's going to say all those who parented from like 1400 to 1590, and all those who parented from about 1950 to about 2050, special party for you only, because parenting really sucked for that whole season. That was a really hard thing. So, yeah. So we do need to reconsider our authority, and we need to, when we say something, we really need to ask, how do we know that? And we need to move from a place of strength when we talk with our kids. Okay, you may have seen this in Tom Friedman's Making America Great Again. He has this great quote right in the introduction. He said, so he wrote this 3 years ago, and he said 6 years ago when he wrote the book The World is Flat, which was all about how technology was changing the world, he said, 6 years ago, Facebook didn't exist, Twitter was a sound, the cloud was in the sky, 4G was a parking place, LinkedIn was a prison, applications were what you sent to college, and Skype, for most people, was a typo. All of that changed in 6 years. So like 10 years ago, Facebook was not anything. Today, Facebook is one of the primary methods human beings communicate with each other, both here and around the world. So we can be gentle with ourselves. Like the fact that we don't know exactly how to handle Facebook or all that. Okay, well, we haven't had that much time. There are no good parenting books about how to do this because we're still learning. So this is all part of, so mental overload. A friend of mine who does what I do, except he does it for large corporations and makes about $500,000 a year, which I'm fine with because I love the fact that I get to minister to people. I'm just kidding. But he came up with this. He said, so if you look at the explosion of information that is available to you and me, this is what it's like. If we were alive in Jesus' time, imagine that we had one pile of information available to us. That was all we needed to sort out, figure out to make life work. The way information has become more and more available, that didn't double until 1500 at the invention of the printing press, the fixed plate printing press. The way information has exploded today, compared with that lovely little person who was following Jesus around in the dirt paths out in Galilee, we now have 1,040,187,000 more pieces of information that we have to make sense of. And so I say this because imagine our kids. We're trying to raise them as Jesus followers. And when I was growing up, that was pretty straightforward because everyone was a Jesus follower, and we only knew about other people through the books that we read. There were Muslims and there were atheists and all that, but the nuns told us about those people. I didn't know that they really existed, and the nuns were able to give us their spin. Today, I can just tell you, in my family, my extended family, we have Muslims and atheists. I mean, people have married into these religions. So when we had 36 people in our home for Christmas last month, we had one of all those, one of all those different religious groups. So kids now see all that, and they're being asked to digest all that. And they're being asked to say, okay, so you mean he goes to hell and I go to heaven because he doesn't believe in Jesus? Okay, but he's a really great guy. In fact, he's nicer than most of my Christian relatives. What do I do with that? All I'm saying is, it's a very different world. And it's far more complex. So what's the impact of all that complexity? The reality is there's a lot more psychiatric illness today than there was just 10 years ago. In fact, there's 1 in 5 people are using psychiatric medications. There's been a 400% increase in antidepressant medicines and skyrocketing rates of anxiety, depression, insomnia, and erectile dysfunction. All those things are going through the roof. People, and why is that? Because our bodies, I don't think we're made for all this stimulation. When we're looking at a screen, it stimulates our brain in such a way that it messes up our ability to kind of ebb and flow and fall asleep when it's time to fall asleep and relax when it's time to relax and have the energy we need to do everything we're supposed to do without feeling depressed, and for men to have an erection at the right time. All those things are part of an organic rhythm through life. And it's all being disrupted at really alarming rates when you look at the data. It also has something to do with the fact that the psychiatric industry is making a ton of money, but that's a different lecture. The other thing we're seeing is impaired decision making. When the brain is overwhelmed, we make bad decisions. You know that. Marketers know that. That's why when you go into a grocery store, the first thing you see when you walk in are fruits and vegetables. Because when your brain is fresh, you'll make really good decisions and pay a lot more money for good fruits and vegetables because it's worth it. The candy bars and overpriced National Enquirer and bad magazines are where? Checkout. Because by the time you get to the checkout, you've made a couple hundred decisions, and the decision maker in your brain is very exhausted, and you're going to make bad decisions. This is a repeatedly proven research. They've shown this with parole boards. Parole boards make great decisions first thing in the morning. Not so much. If you come before a parole board at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, your odds of getting an accurate decision are very low because the brain does a better job first thing. So what does this have to do with us? If we're being constantly bombarded with stimuli, we're having to make decisions about things all day long. I don't know about you. I get about 30 meaningful emails a day. Constant decisions, constant movement. We're going to make bad decisions. There's also a thing that happens when you're looking at a screen. The brain goes into a trance state when you're focusing on a screen like this. When your brain is in a trance state, it's harder to make good decisions. It's much easier for you to click on a story, to find out, you know, why is this so shocking, or find out what happened to this kid when he was in foster care. I mean, you don't care about that. If I said, do you want to hear a really shocking story about what happened to a kid in foster care, you'd be like, Tim, shut up, keep moving. We want to get to the end. But when we're in a trance state, suddenly our brain says, oh, that sounds really good. I wonder what happened to him, right? So, and the last thing, and this is the thing that is most concerning to me, is we do have Daniel Goleman, who's the kind of father of emotional intelligence research, what I was mentioning at the beginning, the ability to know your emotions, speak your emotions, identify emotions, and have the social skills to accurately address what's happening in a social group. That whole ability, millennials, which are this generation of kids, have the lowest scores ever since they've been measuring it in the 70s. Now, he said this at a lecture I was at, and I wrote it down. It's like, oh, that's really cool. I'll look that up. I get home, I'm looking it up. I can't find the study that he's quoting, but he did say it. I have the recording of him saying that they have the worst. And I think that's true. I don't know if you noticed that, but I think kids today need a lot more coaching when it comes to social skills and shake his hand and write a good thank you note than it seemed like we did growing up. Question, does Facebook make you sad? Yeah. What do you think? There's 2 studies that came out on the impact of Facebook within the past 8 months. They're both pretty good studies, and the answer is yes and no. All right. So if you just use Facebook briefly to look at your homepage, check out your friends, and then get off Facebook, Facebook is a good thing for your life. But at the University of Michigan, the other study that they did showed that the more time people spend on Facebook, the sadder it makes you. And they think that has to do with the fact that you're probably comparing your everyday life with everyone else's highlight reel, right? Because you,
Well, there are so many people that have cancer and this and that.
Yeah. Well, there's that too, right? Yeah. Or how about my favorite? I'm having a really terrible day. The worst day of my life.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, okay, what's wrong with you? You know?
Right.
Please tell us, because nothing's going to be the same until I find out why your histrionic little rear end is getting us all upset about you.
My son was really anxious because he just started middle school and whatever, so we went for a walk, and he's like, it's just, he said, I have all these thoughts all the time, what do I have to do with it? And I said, when you have that, because we lived in Shanghai for 2 years, so he had, this whole experience, and then I do not, take the phone away because that's how he communicates with his dad, because my husband travels a lot. Anyway, so he's like, I have all these thoughts of what's coming and what I did and blah, blah, and I said, just put yourself, because that's an Asian ritual, is put yourself in the present.
Yeah. So,
like what we did at the beginning,
yes.
Look at what's really around you right now, and don't, just be in the
present. That is really wonderful. And can you hold that? Because I'm going to talk about that. That's a big deal. I think getting kids back connected to that organic, yes. Or did you have something else to add to that?
No.
Oh, okay, no, because I think that is really, thank you, that's good.
He did say that it worked, and I was like, okay.
Well, and I think that's something that no one had to teach us, but I think we need to teach our kids. How do you relax? How do you just wear your take bare feet and go walk around the grass and feel what grass feels like? It's almost like we need to recreate what it means to be human for them. So what should we do? This is the part where let's talk together about what we can do with this, okay? This is, and I think there's 4 different strategies. The first one is we need to take charge. We have to check out their gut. I took my son as part of my own commitment to giving my kids organic, earthy, kind of out in nature experiences. I took Brendan, who was 13 and get ready to start at U of D Jesuit. I hired a guide to take us fly fishing up north. And great guide. And like an old-time guy, you know, like, one of the things that these fly fishers do, because when you're fly fishing, it's not like throwing a worm in the water and everything wants to eat it. I mean, the fly fisherman, you have to pick just the right little ugly-looking thing and you have to know what's in season and what bugs are reproducing and all that. So, first fish of the day, he pulls that fish in and slices open its gut and lets everything come out of the stomach and puts right on his boat. And he's like, okay, okay. And then he goes to his little fly thing and starts getting flies that look like the little nymphs and bugs and larvae that the fish are eating. Why? Because he says you can't catch a fish unless you know what they want to eat. And in his mind, you can't know what they want to eat until you see what they're eating. So you catch your first fish, open it up, and look at what they're eating. So I thought, that has an application to parenting. Not the one that might come to mind initially, but I think one of the things that, if you were to leave with one thing today, and when it comes to technology and tweens, it's this. We need to understand what they're doing and what they're experiencing. And so I think there's 2 ways of doing it. One is dialogue. You know, I think being able to just talk with our kids about what they're watching. Always have, we'll get to this later, but always have their electronics in a place. Like we have a rule in our family, even though I got a 20-year-old, the rule is no screens go up in the rooms. So we just got our kid an iPad. And she's like, woo, I'm 17, I got an iPad, that's great. And it stays down here, like whenever you use it. It never goes up to your room. Why? Because we want to be able to walk up and look and say, oh, what are you doing? There's no reason why anything private should go on a computer screen. There's no reason for that. We tell our kids, if you want to do something private, have a private conversation. Go for a walk, meet at Starbucks. You know, go outside with your cell phone, that's fine. But don't ever do anything private. Why? Because it's not private. Because everything you're doing is out there, and one day will come back to haunt you. So anyway, to dialogue with kids, finding a way to increase your awareness. Because I think our tendency is to just stay away. You know, you walk by, you look at something, it's like, I don't know what that is. So to talk with them. The other thing is, there's many programs that allow you to monitor the computer. Covenant Eyes is more of it more keeps them away from bad sites, but will let you know if they go to a bad site. Spectre Pro is the one I use on all my machines at home. Spectre Pro it's sold by Spectre Soft, and it's a stealth monitoring. So we told our kids we're monitoring everything you do. We're not spying. It's just that if you want to do something private, don't do it on the computer. Do it some other way. You have a right to privacy, but not on any of your computers. They don't like that rule, but that's a rule we established about 10 years ago. So what I do with SpectreSoft is at the end of the night after everyone's in bed, I just quickly flip it on. You put in the secret code because it's nowhere else. You need to hit hotkeys. It pops up, and you just hit review, and it really quickly, like 3 screens a second, shows you everywhere they've been. And it's amazing. At like 3 or 4 snapshots per second, you can see everywhere it is. And so if you see anything inappropriate, you can also look for inappropriate searches, and it determines what's inappropriate. So anything having to do with pornography or whatever, it'll find. Yes?
So do you have to go through, like if there's a laptop and a
That's,
desktop, do you have to go through every...
that's the killer, yes.
Okay.
You need, and the problem is it's like $100 and you have to buy a separate program for each one. So that's hard. And if you have Apple products, it doesn't work. It only works on the computer Apple products. It doesn't work on iPhones or iPads. So, and I'll get to that in a second. But the first thing I think we got to do, now has anyone found any creative ways of monitoring your kids?
I found ways that they actually can somehow delete it as well.